Hello, everybody, and welcome to Elephants in Our Room. And I'm your host, Janet Kira Lesson, with Debra DeFranco and Karen Christine Patrick. And we are going to talk about all kinds of interesting things on today's show about the elephants that are in all of our rooms, the topics we don't talk about, plus the ones we do, and we're going to talk about what we think about them. So, everybody's turned on. Without further ado, I'd like to bring on my co-host. Let's see. Who wants to go first? Debra or Karen? Who has a burning share? What topic do you want to talk about? Whoever speaks
Let's
up
do
first.
Karen's observation about TV.
Okay, Karen, right before we move on air, she said, I have to tell you about my observation about TV. Just a little background. We're both saying, like we were all saying, how long it's been since we've watched real television. For me, it's been over 20 years. Debra said it was 10 years. But then Karen said, I have an observation, and then we went live. So go ahead, Karen. What's your observation?
This is just one of those energy frequency things that, you know, kind of people like we are aware of as well as people in the audience. But I noticed when you're like outside and you see a house and maybe in their living room you can't really see in the living room, but the TV is the only thing that's on, right? And the dominant color is blue.
Yeah.
In fact, they even talked about the damage to our eyes from our screens reflecting back blue light. And blue is the throat chakra, so it's like the tone of communication. But so what is it doing to that part of our energy field that has that blue spectrum that something outside of us is communicating and we aren't because we're quiet and we're prostrate before this box? I was kind of an on and off TV watcher my whole life. My parents were kind of ambivalent about it, so sometimes we had it, sometimes we didn't. And I know we were the last ones on our block to get color TV, but so I was kind of not exactly hooked in the way other people seem to be, and some of us went right from that to our devices. And you know, there's this wonderful program called The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron, and it's a way to help people reclaim their creativity. And one of the things you do for a week is a media fast. No radio, no TV, no writing, reading anything. I mean, it's pretty blunt, and it's kind of weirdly healthy for you because you get in touch with your own thoughts and with other, you know, nature and your family and your pets. And so I don't know. I just think about that because sometimes people get used to the din or the drum of it. And honestly, if that's getting you by during COVID, okay, I'm not going to rag on that. It's just something to think about.
Well, I've walked past open, windows, and you can hear it, and if you're from a distance, it just sounds like it's like this duck quacking, and you wonder what that's doing. You just listen to that, it's like a pounding type sound going into you. So you have the visual, and I wonder why it comes out blue. That's interesting. I haven't walked past a television on in
if you happen to be taking
20
a
or
walk
30
in
years.
the evening, if you're taking a walk in the evening and you just go by houses, and you'll just notice that blue cast of the
glare.
Light.
The glare of the light. It's always blue. She's right.
It's blue. Wow.
Well, there was an article this week that talked about the blue. They are connecting higher rates of colorectal cancer to people that are on devices all the time. The higher your exposure to the blue light in your device, the higher your chances of colorectal cancer. But I'm not sure, and I don't think they are either, of what that connection is exactly.
It's not that you're sitting around on your tush?
That's what I thought, because you're sitting around on your butt, right, watching your device.
Well, there's another aspect of that. Bill Corso Jr. wrote the day after Roswell, and he said that the screens are made out of these alien technologies that they recovered from the Roswell crash. But he was given all this stuff to reverse engineer, and so he handed it out to all these major corporations with a cover story of what this material was, and he invited places like Raytheon and all kinds of high-tech companies to reverse engineer what he was given. And so what they discovered is that we couldn't do the transistors, the tiny technology required to make big computers until the Roswell crash, and that was reverse engineered. But they made a decision to go ahead and use it despite the fact that it was alive. So, and they acknowledged it's got something to do with the black goo that a lot of conspiracy people would talk to. And of course, it sounds like conspiracy, and I've lost all respect for conspiracy. But there were conspiracies before the modern era of conspiracy, which has gotten hijacked and manipulated and twisted, like during the Trump era. But this is back in '97. So maybe what we're dealing with is some kind of alien technology, much like our exposure to radiation gives us cancer. Whatever this technology, it's in the black screen, the black screen of our phones, that is some kind of technology that appears to be alien.
Yeah, that's conspiracy analysis, not necessarily conspiracy theory. People don't realize the term conspiracy theory was invented by the CIA because that was what they labeled people who questioned the Warren report on the assassination of President Kennedy. So they wanted to discredit people, so they called them a conspiracy theorist. But, the word conspiracy means to breathe together. It means that you're kind of huddled over a table with two to three people breathing the same air and talking the same way and concocting the same plan. So conspiring is real. Another presidential assassination in Lincoln, there was actually, people who conspired to do that. And the key to this is to be a conspiracy analyst or someone who, Aristotle had this saying that you should be able to talk about or entertain an idea without necessarily accepting it. It means that you kind of, in my mind, you kind of put this pieces of information on the table. You don't necessarily suck them in and you don't necessarily reject them. You just kind of have them in like, okay, here's all these weird things. And then if you just keep going with an analysis, you start to see a pattern and you see how things fit together. But it's important to keep a, kind of a skeptical mindset, but not a pseudo-skeptical mindset. Some people say, I'm a skeptic. It's because you already made up your mind. That's not, one of the founders of one of the skeptic societies said that. He said, if you are just somebody who rejects stuff because you've already made up your mind, you're actually not really a skeptic. It has to do with having an analytical process. And then also, too, I think these days being much more careful about what you accuse people of and throw around, that hurts people. That's a big part of what's going on right now is people are demonizing other people. And it's, I understand that, political stuff is really high and everything, but just be a little bit more like careful walking through what's going on with people and where they're getting their information. And as an information analysis, I had a computer business for 20 years. You have iterations and permutations of information. One of the ways that if they want to hide a certain idea, they'll put out, 100 different stories. And depending on who repeats the story, they can tell what information source that they're drawing from and make a map. It's not that hard.
Right.
And so, it's like, if there's ever a time for caution and erring on the side of supporting people, I go back to the basic needs things. I'm glad you guys aren't tired of that yet. It doesn't seem so, because one of the things that wild, accusations does is it does cut people off of resources that they need. It's a way to separate people from the resources that they need. So it is a time to be very thoughtful and cautious.
Well, I'm reading this article. I want to, in line with what you just said there about the demonization process. This is an article called "We Now Know That White Supremacy Groups Are Responsible for Much of Violence Blamed on Black Lives Matter." But it's from the Daily Cause. But when you go to the last paragraph, it said, let's see, the Republican National Convention speakers will amp up the fear considerably around the events in Wisconsin. So, they're sending in people. It's ramping up. There's, 3 or 4 people have been killed. There was a guy, the Kenosha Shooter, that just walked through. And there's a video on that. It's very disturbing. And then there was the other guy, Jacob Blake, that got 5 bullets in his back. He just tried to get in the car with his 3 kids in there, and they shoot him 5 times in his back. Now, seriously, officers, somebody's trying to get in your car, you just, get their hands and put behind their back and handcuff them. Why do you have to shoot them 5 times in the back? Certainly you can overpower somebody getting into the car. I've seen you do it. I've seen you guys do it over and over.
Why can't?
Anyway, the point that I'm saying is, go ahead. Why can't what?
Why can't they shoot them in the leg? Why do you have to shoot them in the back? Why do you have to shoot to kill? That's the part I don't get.
That was obviously going to kill this guy, and they didn't just shoot him once. They shot him 5 times. The guy's got his back. He doesn't have a gun in his back, right? He's not going to. Oh, that's a coward. That's a murderous coward. It's not like, remember the Wild West, we used to go and stand off and shoot each other. It was kind of fair. Bastards and kill. No, it's like, we're just going. That was the lowest of lows, shooting somebody in the back. And that was
my dad was
into.
He was always into those westerns, and that was like, the lowest of the low.
Lowest of the low, shooting somebody in the back. And let's go and hang that person the highest yard of. Anyway, so they're going to amp up the fear and the violence, and so they're accelerating this violence, and they can use it to demonize people, just like you're talking about. The fear of the other has worked before for the Republicans. Michael Dukakis was up by 8 points over George Bush in the summer of '88. Before the GOP played the real important racist card, and Dukakis thought that the public would see through it. But so Democrats have a history of losing elections because of that attitude. And let's see, George Bush, who was a draft dodger, started 2 wars, was able to win re-election when his party effectively painted his opponent, Silver Star recipient John Kerry, as some kind of war traitor. So this is what they're doing. They're manipulating and creating this demonization process. And even though the Democrats are way up in the polls, it's still a long way before Election Day. And this is a strategy they use over and over of this constant lies and fear and demonization that's been very effective. So get out and vote. Don't buy the bullshit. But okay, Debra, your turn. I'm upset today. Can you tell?
Well, you're going to be upset until after this election. I'm hoping what the Democrats do. I'll tell you, Karen. I told this to Janet. I live in upstate New York, and I had to drive from Niagara Falls to Rochester, which is a little over an hour away. And I took back streets, and the back road actually runs along Lake Ontario through farm country. And property after property had Trump signs on it, Trump Pence signs. I did not see not one Biden-Harris sign. And it was a little disconcerting. And I walk around my neighborhood, and it's the same thing. I think I saw one Biden sign, and I see Trump signs everywhere. And it's obviously a predominantly white area, and farm country is predominantly white. But I'm hoping, this is my hope, right? We should never take for granted the lead.
Hope.
I'm hoping that the Democrats have a two-fork plan, right? Plan A, Plan B. Plan A is to win the presidency, right? Best case. Mm-hmm. Plan B is to win control of the Senate, because they can get Trump on all his corruption if they have control of the House and the Senate, and they can get him out of office, right? So That's my hope. Whether they have that plan or not, I'm not sure. They're not talking about that, right? They talk very little about taking control of the Senate. And, that's where the balance of power is. There's a reason there's, a three-fork, I don't know if I want to call them central aspects of power, right? Legislative, judicial, and what's the other one? I'm having brain farts tonight.
Executive. Legislative, judicial, and executive, yes, right? So just because they don't win the presidency, if we don't win the presidency, all hope is not lost if they do win control of the Senate. So people need to keep that in mind, that every vote for every position in office matters in this election. Because I'm very concerned what will happen if Trump wins and the Republicans hold control of the Senate. I mean, I truly believe the Republicans in this country, they don't care about the individual people. They don't. And I think they don't care about law and order because they're the first to break the law. They don't care about truth and honesty because they're the first to lie. Anything to maintain power, the ends justifies the means. And that's what I say to anybody that sits there and supports Trump. I'm like, he's an admitted sexual predator. He has cheated everybody he's ever done business with. He's run every company he's ever run into the ground. Every business he's run into the ground. He demonizes people he demonizes women, period. Like, to sit here and act like you care about women, you don't care anything about women. And I find it very frustrating that these people still support this man, because if this were President Obama doing all these things, they'd want to hang him out to dry. So my response to all of you is the end justifies the means, right? As long as white power stays in control, that's all you care about. You don't care how we get there. And I'm passing the stick.
Okay.
Kind of a stick drop, like a mic drop. That was great.
Drop. Yeah. Cool.
Stick drop. Yeah, I know what you're saying, and okay, so I'm trying my best to ignore that the RNC convention is going on. I grew up with the RNC convention being piped in my very conservative home, and so I've seen a lot of them. Of course, none of the conventions are the same, really, with the COVID. They're fully, a televised spectacle only. You physically can't go there.
Right.
But so there was this one moment that I have to comment on. There was this moment when one of the women speakers said that she wouldn't mind if households only got one vote, and that the man had the final say. Right? You guys see that?
Scary. Oh.
And I have to let you guys know that was kind of a teaching in my very far-right conservative cult church that I grew up in, is that a woman should not negate the vote of her husband and should either abstain from voting or vote the way that he does. And what's kind of crazy is on my mother's side, my grandmother was a Democrat. She was an FDR Democrat. And, before that, as you go back, you get into the suffragettes. And I'm going, there's a bunch of martyred suffragettes who might have a different opinion of that altogether. But it's like There's even been talk that of repealing the amendment that allows for women to vote, and I'm like, I cannot believe that this is still around. And by the way, if that's the case, why is she up there talking? Why are any of the women up there talking? Because in the church I grew up in, women were not allowed to talk up in the front at all, ever. So it's like, if you're going to go against like what you're doing, urging people, women, like, why would you be up there? Wouldn't you be up there to be urging women to vote for Trump? Otherwise, why would you have a woman up there? So it's like,
crazy.
So you just want to just like, so I know you and I, Janet, have talked about that show and movie and book, The Handmaid's Tale.
That's wonderful.
That
series.
Book profoundly, I was kind of making my way out of my belief system I grew up in. That book had a profound effect on me. Because I know that, well, first of all, one of the things Margaret Atwood did when she wrote that book was she said she did not use anything in the book that had not already happened somewhere, like some, it's kind of a dystopia about a part of America that turns into a theocracy, and the women are not allowed to work, not allowed to read, they have to wear uniforms, etc. And it's set in a time of ecological disaster, which, hey, we're going.
Hey, China gets close to home.
Yeah. And the thing was, I knew reading that that's exactly what some of these people would do if they were unfettered, if they had no opposition, if they had free reign to do what they wish. This is what they would do, and. It radicalized me, probably one of the earliest things that began to change my thinking a lot. That and actually becoming divorced in that environment, because they were really, it didn't matter what caused the divorce, they blamed the women. It was the woman's fault. So it's like, I hope that this is the last gasp of this kind of thinking. Because they cannot hide anymore. They have driven it all the way to as far as they can. They've shown us exactly who they are and what they believe. They can't hide behind platitudes anymore. They can't hide behind slogans anymore. This is apocalypto. This is the revelation of what the intent is. And I think we need to, I guess Maya Angelou said, if someone tells you who they are, believe them. And I'm mic dropping that today.
Wow. Okay, that was good. I like our talking stick mic drop. Okay, let me go back to the site here. I have a list of what we're talking about. So the Lincoln Project, I've got to watch these. I haven't watched them. They put out this is a bunch of Republicans that are fighting back against Trump. And we mentioned earlier, we really need to win it all back. There was a point, I think, under Obama when we had all three parts. Now we've lost the judicial branch. And, we've got Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who's not in the best health. So we don't know how much longer she'll last. And we've got to get control back to stop having all these right-wingers take over the judicial branch for the next 20, 30 years. It's just absolutely insane. Because I don't think that the judicial branch should have lifetime appointments. In fact, I was just imagining that if we had a limited-term presidential system, and kind of like the UK has a no confidence, like you don't get reelected when people lose confidence. They would have lost confidence in Trump a long time ago, and he wouldn't have lasted a year, right? But so they have a removal system that isn't like ours, where we have to impeach, because we see that the impeachment did not work. But we've seen the UK remove several prime ministers very easily. So apparently Boris Johnson is going to he realized he lost confidence, so he's reached an agreement. Yeah, I will step down at a certain time. It seems more sophisticated, more conscious to just realize, I've lost the confidence of the people and the confidence of the other members of the whatever their system's called, a cabinet or whatever, that you just say, okay, I'm stepping down. But no, here we have to do high drama and all this politicizing and demonization process to get rid of somebody. But if we would just go to a 4-year term for everybody, from local local people to the federal level, I think that we could clear out the energy and save a lot of money in all these campaigns. I mean, we still have people campaigning, but if you had to step down after 4 years, now you could go back maybe after sitting out for 4 years or something like that, take some other role. Maybe you can switch into a cabinet position, but you rotate out, because this is too perverse. I'm traumatized. I'm traumatized by this whole political system. It's like, okay, so I'm going to drop and pass the stick. Who is next? Debra, I guess. Yeah. I'm after Karen.
Well,
Debra's after
the problem with the system in the UK is the people don't get to elect their representatives. It's a parliamentary system. And so, people get selected within the party, but the citizens don't get to elect their representatives. And that I don't think is good. They got to remember the whole point.
No, I don't agree with the whole thing. I just like that one element. I like that element.
Term limits. We had term limits in California, and it was a complete and utter failure. Because
why did it fail? Tell us that.
Well, because all they were worried about was what was next. They weren't engaged in the moment, and they were worried about where they were going to go next after their term was up, right? So they were always positioning and maneuvering for what was next and making selfish decisions instead of making decisions based on people. And then the other thing that happened is you lost your experience, right? Part of some of the best senators or representatives in Congress often are the ones that have been around longer because they have the experience, they've established relationships, right? When you're doing term limits, that doesn't happen. Now, I think like in California, there's some term limits that are very quick, right? You only get once or twice at bat, and then, you have to move on to something else. So I think it should be like in California.
Politics, maybe not. What about the people, the judiciary that has a lifetime appointment? I think that's
okay. But I've told you that, and I think even now it has even shown even some of Trump's judges don't always rule Trump's way. When lawyers become judges, they take that very seriously. It does not matter what their political leanings were, right? And you see that with the Supreme Court. Look at John Roberts, right? Look at how he's ruled on some very important cases lately. Trump's response is, I don't think he likes me. Well, he's not supposed to like you. That's not what his job is there. His job is to rule based on the law or the intent of the law. Often when legislators create law, it's intentionally ambiguous. They don't want to work out all the details. They think that's someone else's job, right? And so the courts and the administrators get left to do that. So law is created multiple ways. One, it's legislative, and then the other is it's precedent setting in the judicial side of this. But when people become judges, they take it seriously, and they have someone to answer to. There's judicial committees that look at people's behavior. There's appellate courts, right? If there's a judge that's ruling based on bias, that usually gets discovered in the appellate courts, and it gets changed at that level. So there's always multiple levels to escalate a case to, based on what's going on. So you could have one judge that's totally against you, but if you get to appeal that case, you're sitting in front of a different judge and you've got another shot at it. So I don't think the judicial branch, even though they've put, 251 judges, conservative judges in the courts, I don't think that is so much the issue. The issue right now is the legislative branch. They're not legislating. They're not doing their jobs. They've advocated their constitutional responsibility, in their fealty to a reality TV star.
Well, what do you call it? The Congress passes all kinds of stuff. It goes and sits on the desk of Mitch McConnell, and he won't even let them talk about it.
But that's what I'm saying. He's abdicated his legislative responsibility. He's not legislating. They're dead in the water
he's
because
political.
they refuse to work together.
He doesn't want his Republican president or his Republican Congress to have to even deal with things. It's too political. When you get into the judiciary, once you're in the Congress, you shouldn't be a political party anymore. So that's what happens. You're supposed to represent everybody, but it's still political throughout the whole process, no matter what branch it is. The president, the judiciary, and the Congress. So it's basically a flawed system. It's one big giant catch-22. And over the years, it gets warped. Did you watch The Family, Deborah? The series called The Family?
I did. I actually watched it a few days ago. The system works.
Okay.
When people adhere to their constitutional responsibility. You have the Republican Party that is refusing to work with the Democrats. The Democrats aren't refusing to work with the Republicans. The Republicans are refusing to work with the Democrats. Your job, your constitutional job is to work with the other side.
So what do we do? All they have to do is like you're walking a big dog, is they put their heels in and they refuse to move. And now they're going, nanny, boo-boo, what are you going to do about it? And now our president is saying, I'm not going to step down, even if I do lose the election. The election's fraud. The election's a fraud as long as he's losing. But as soon as he wins, it's not a fraud. It's all accurate. So it's like a bragging kid that wants everything his way. And so he's making it his way. That's a dictator. We no longer have a democracy. We have a dictatorship. So what do we do now because our system did not work?
You have to vote them out. You have to vote them out.
But what if he doesn't
You vote
leave?
people that are willing to do the job. What? Something is wrong if you have citizens that are supporting this. But our problem is most citizens, they're not knowledgeable about this process. They're not knowledgeable about how things work. They watch Fox News and Facebook. They don't watch anything else.
They're
programmed. They don't educate themselves.
They're programmed. So as we started this conversation with parents talking about rolling up their cults, and my cousin had a cult, they weren't even allowed to have a television. So somewhere around 65 or 66, they got a television. We had these cults.
Great question. Karen, how did you break free from this? Like when did the light bulb go off, and what motivated you to break free?
That's an interesting question because it was a process. I think the process starts with my mom, who is still in that organization. But she converted to that church from being a Catholic, and she had rejected being a Catholic because there's a long, weird story, but we had incidences around my grand. Okay, that's such a history I can't even tell it. But basically, she had a jaded eye, and she pointed out things that were said in the rhetoric that was being talked about. She poked holes in it a bit, and that got me saying, you got to. When somebody says something, you got to observe it and weigh it out. Don't just take it right in just because there's some kind of authority figure. And that helped, as well as, I started having life circumstances that were divergent from what they were saying, because the environment that they were saying, so the worldview or the paradigm, was kind of this complete bubble, and it was theoretical. It was like, if women submit to the men completely, then the home will run perfectly well. Well, that doesn't say what happens if the man's an alcoholic, which was what my situation was, abusive alcoholic person. It was like the whole thing was on me as the wife, as the woman, and it didn't matter what I said or did or cried or whatever. It did not matter at all, because there was no accountability process to what he was doing, nor was there any way to communicate to anyone, you know, what was going on. And I remember this one time we visited this Christian counselor, and you know, there was an incident, and it was a violence incident, and I had separated, and he asked me, "Are you a Christian?" And I said, well, at the time I was, so I said yes. And then he asked him, "Are you a Christian?" And he said yes. And then he goes, "So what's the problem? What do you do with that?" You know, so it's kind of like beginning to trust that my observation and my assessment of my experiences were superior to the leadership. It was about the hierarchy game, you know. And, you know, we were talking about how do we deal with our society. One factor that, you know, I kind of can see now, because it took me a while to develop an observation point of this, is we actually have too many decisions that we should be making that are made by we're asking our government to make those decisions on a day-to-day basis. So we've transferred our personal agency over to the leadership, and then we're going to hope that they're going to give a crap about us. They've got all the power. And it's not just that it's the parties or whatever. It is the institutional power. We've transferred too much of our autonomy, too. So this is one of the reasons why I support the basic income, is it puts the money back in people's hands so they can make their personal decisions, so they don't have to have the government do that. So an example is if you give money to people directly, and this would be as a reparation more or less for the corporations and the upper echelon and the elite and the oligarchy from creating a machine that sucks up power and assets, you know, and you rebalance it. So it's kind of like a court settlement, you know, to give money to the people in a sense. And then they decide what they're going to do with it. And they make their own decisions, and they don't have to beg and ask for someone from the top to, make sure we have some food and make sure we have a house, and, you know, because that creates these bureaucracies. And there's people who benefit by these bureaucracies. There's what they call the poverty industry, which is kind of two parts. It's the systems of, you know, charity, which every large organization asks to solve the poverty problem, creates an agency, or they create an organization that takes the money in, you know, donations, and the first thing they do is they pay for the physical plant, the salaries, the benefits, and they pay for the executives, and people get very offended when they find out how much the head of the Red Cross makes, etc. And then they make an obstacle course for the needful people. They put them in an obstacle course and make sure they're deserving, and they have to turn every kind of piece of paper in and blah, 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 until they get this little pittance of whatever. That's not enough. And that's part of the problem, is we're asking these large organizations when we're not giving the autonomy back to people. And then we're blind to it. We're like, we're going to vote, or we're going to do this. And I do agree with voting, by the way. I'm just saying that that's one factor to consider, is how much agency we the people have given these organizations. And now we have to ask for them to do right. But it's like, why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't you want people to have their agency back? Because here's how it goes right now. They're not giving anybody anything to deal with the fact that they've shut down the economy. They're not giving us any more stimulus payments. They're not giving us any emergency loans. We've got people about ready to be foreclosed on right and left. And they're going to let that happen. I want you guys to know that. I know this from dipping in and out of the poverty sector. They're going to let you fail. But it doesn't make any sense.
Right.
And then they're going to bail out all the stores. Why are they going to bail out the stores and let the customers be destroyed? What kind of capitalism is that? That you save the store, but you let the customers burn? It makes no sense. It is in their best interest if they really want an economy to make sure the supply and the demand side are equally taken care of, so that the thing can flow. Our economy is based on flow. So we're now dealing with sort of a weird, self-destructive kind of AI where it doesn't even make any sense at all. But that's the thing, is that we have not recognized the need to protect and support everybody. If you just protect and support the top echelon, even they're going to fail eventually, because who's going to take care of them when the rest of us are toasted? Doesn't make sense.
Hunger Games, right?
No, that's why. It doesn't make sense, and that's what you have to look at. It goes, this isn't a logical thing, because we would have resolved this a long time ago. This isn't a fair thing, because we would have resolved this a long time ago. We've got to look at who benefits by us failing, right? And so that's why you get into these, alien agendas and the depopulation program, these conspiracies, because everything that's in this container, it just kind of gets negated. That's not logical. That's not kind. That's not loving. That's not logical. That's not how any conscious person would run a governing system, being a local to the federal. That's just not human. It's inhumane. And that's why you go, well, this is not human, then who is it? Right? Is it reptilian? Is it Archons? Is it Anunnaki? Who wants to see humans and humanity fail? And that's why I keep investigating it. But, okay. So am I after Karen? Karen, were you complete? I'm sorry I interrupted, but that was very inspiring.
Oh, no, you're fine.
I just had to add my 2 cents.
I'm glad you took this stick. It's so cool.
Okay. So let me look through these articles. Oh, did we cover? We're kind of jumping around. So we're going into our evangelistic programming. Now, I was raised Presbyterian, but the evangelists came in and took over my family, and so this is my trigger point. And so the right-wing stuff about trying to control and manipulate us individually and collectively, down to how the parents, have children, raise children, the relationship between the sexes, the mother, father, and trying to define our, us into categories, the rejection of the gay GLBTQ community. So that, have we completed that topic? Evangelists and religions, and sexuality, and gender and race. And I guess we can move into race. Are we complete with that aspect of this show? Oh my goodness, we're 2:43. So we're 42 minutes into the show. Do you want to go into another topic?
Well, let's talk about how the white supremacists have infiltrated the police and law enforcement organizations, and this was based on a government report.
Tell us about that, please. I didn't get to read that.
Well, they have found, I think what started it, what kind of lit the match to look into it, is they kept seeing law enforcement officers making racial hand gestures in photographs. And I often think a lot of it has to do, yes. And so they started looking into this. The FBI looked into this, and they did a report. And they found that the white supremacists and these militia guys have started infiltrating, police agencies and law enforcement agencies. And I think that's part of what's going on with Black Lives Matter. Why, the law enforcement has this immunity that's been played out in the court that that they rarely get charged. They rarely get charged when they do something unethical or illegal. And police officers know they have this immunity, which is why I think they shoot to kill. They don't want you to live because they don't like you. But you don't see white police officers, assassinating white men or women in the streets. You see white police officers assassinating people of color, both Hispanic and black, right? So if that's not blatant racism, I don't know what is, And there was someone that put together a list of all the people that have been assassinated by the police, by law enforcement, people of color, the last 2 years. That list was so long, it made me cry. And there isn't a list like that for white citizens, right? And I've witnessed that kind of brutality firsthand. Like, I worked in the inner cities for years, volunteering to help people navigate the legal system, the court system, because how people think the courts work and how they really work are usually two different things. And so one of the things about becoming a paralegal taught me how to navigate the system so it can't work against me, and I was able to look at the system from the inside. And my intention was to become a lawyer, and then I changed my mind after a conversation with a judge. But I felt like the training and education was invaluable because the system can never be used against me again, right? And I'll give you an example. I was married to someone who had a huge child support bill, right? And I didn't know this at the time that we got married. And so I was expecting this big tax refund, and I didn't get it. And come to find out, because we were married, they were able to take my tax refund to pay his back child support.
Oh, my God.
So I made sure from that point on, I changed my deductions on my W-4 for my paycheck so that I would owe the government at the end of every year instead of getting a tax refund. So they could never take my money again for something that wasn't mine.
Right? And it's something addressing. Let me quickly today. I followed the thread here. Now the Kenosha shooter, he killed Anthony Huber, and he was white, so it's not 100%. Now I don't know who the second person was, but Anthony Huber, they've got a memorial. He was a skater. Yeah. So, but it predominantly is people of color. But one night I just said I do on YouTube. I said police shootings, police shootings, and they also go after people that are handicapped. I saw several where there were people that were just obviously, as soon as they pulled them over, they had their driver's license, they were legal, but they were slow. And this one poor guy was, he said, whatever, he pulled him. And they tasered him to death. He said, "You're going to kill me. You're going to kill me. I just want to go home." It was so pitiful. It was just so, I watched about 5 of them, and I started to cry. Because I did think they would all be brown or black. But I just was objectively like, police shootings. And there was another woman who was at a hotel, and she was working behind, checking people in, and she was on the phone, and this cop came, and she was just talking to her sister or somebody, and the cop got her to come out from behind the desk, and he just shot her, like 3 or 4 times. He shot her dead. And she wasn't doing anything. She was just on the phone trying to talk to her sister, and she said, "There's somebody bothering me." I guess she was reporting this guy that was harassing her. It was a cop harassing her. Anyway, I don't know all the backstories, but it's like, wow, they just kill. And sometimes it's the same race against. There was one shooting here in Maui where it was a local police officer of color, and this woman stole a car, and he chased her down through all the towns, and then she finally pulled over, and he had her, and they had her blocked, and he just ran over right to her door. She was still in the car, and he shot her through the window, just killed her. So we've got to do something about these police. We're giving authority to these people that maybe not the most mentally stable. But the first thing they do is shoot to kill instead of trying to talk somebody down and, handcuff them. But they always make that excuse. They say, oh, they were resisting. And I think that's why they started wearing body cams. But now they can just very easily shut it off. And then, they get away with murder, literally. So back to you. I just wanted to interject that.
Well, I love the body cam idea, but they shouldn't have the ability to shut it off.
Yeah.
Right? They need to be held accountable. Police officers know that they're not going to be held accountable. And I think that kind of power breeds arrogance. And then the arrogance breeds a lack of accountability and the belief that you can't be challenged. I've watched police officers completely overreact in a situation. But I'll tell you what, there was a good story. I took defensive driving one time, and the man was a police officer who was teaching it. And he made a very good point. He goes, you don't know the call that police officer answered 30 minutes before he came across you. And his example was he had answered a call, and it was a domestic violence call where the father had thrown a 3-year child through a plate glass window, right? Wow. And then he had to go back out on the street after that was over. And he had pulled someone over for speeding, and it was some random white guy who was in a really expensive car, who was very entitled. And he got in the cop's face and started cussing the cop out. And the cop arrested him. Like the cop wanted to deck him. And, the cop had just witnessed the most horrifying things 30 minutes before. And to have this rich, arrogant guy, just completely lose it because he got a speeding ticket was ridiculous. But I told you about the flip side of that is I lived in Long Beach. And I was getting ready to move to Philadelphia for a job, and I had gone grocery shopping to leave groceries in the house for my daughter before I left. And as I'm getting out of the car, it's nighttime, and there must have been 30 cop cars on my street. And I get out of my car, and I look over, and there's 2 black men on the ground, handcuffed with their hands behind their back, and the cops are pummeling these guys. And when I say pummeling, I'm talking about beating the crap out of them mercifully. And I'm standing there in shock because my eyes are seeing this, but my brain can't register that this is really happening, right? And I knew the guys that they were doing this to. They were my neighbors across the street. And and I was the only white face on the block. And a police officer saw that. All the other faces were people of color. And so as soon as he saw me, everyone else was standing around watching, and the cops weren't worried about that. They were worried about me. And so he got in my face, and he's like, he started verbally assaulting me. And I'm like, I'm not doing anything. I just got out of my car. I just, went to the grocery store. And I'm like, why are you guys beating the crap out of them? They're handcuffed face down. He was like threatening to take me to jail. So I watch this, and I take note of it, and I go upstairs, and the next day we get this notice that someone in the neighborhood had put out. It turned out that the cops answered a call to an incorrect address. It was 1 block up and over is where they should have.
Oh, my God.
Yes, right? And, I mean, you couldn't recognize the faces of these men when it was over with. They had beat these men so bad. And they were looking for people that had witnessed this. And, people in the neighborhood weren't going to say anything. And I was white, and I witnessed it. And so, the community wanted me to speak up, and the cops were threatening me. But I was moving to Philadelphia the next day. I wasn't sticking around for this. But the police were terrified that if this middle-aged white woman got in court and spoke about what she saw, they would be in a lot of trouble. Mind you, they weren't worried about the 50 or so black faces that were around the block looking at this.
Wow.
So, like I said,
Well,
I've witnessed police brutality firsthand. There's good cops and there's bad cops. Personally, I think there's a lot more bad cops than there are good cops. And I'm passing the stick.
Okay, Karen.
While this is going on, I just purchased the ebook. Was Where Do We Go From Here? Martin Luther King's last book he wrote before he was assassinated. And I tend to look through economic colored glasses a lot because that's kind of the what I'm looking at mostly. And he actually advocated for a basic income. A lot of people don't know that. And it was interesting because I was also looking at a chart today that had to do with the productivity of the American worker plus the technology we've developed is just off the charts. And so the CEO pay and the oligarch pay took the benefit. I call it the inventor's dividend because my great-grandfather was an inventor. And then kind of wages went stagnant and everything else. And the thing was there's this economic component because it left a lot of people out of the benefit, as well as out of people of color as well were disenfranchised. And so you have to think of the who are they protecting and who are they serving, really. It does not feel like regular normal people of color, disenfranchised people. I don't think that they are the intended ones to be protected and served. It doesn't look that way. It doesn't feel that way. And there needs to be an accountability process. Absolutely. But again, it has to do with that. This is one of the disempowerment of us, is that we're pitted against each other as if, that's even true. It is not even true that if you're a person who thinks that a person of color took your job or something, you're not understanding the economics at all. You're not taking it into account. A lot of people think that automation and technological unemployment is down the road 20 years. It's literally been going on since the 50s and 60s, and we're all drawing from a set of resources that is dwindling, while we're all caught up in this. They're getting away like the real bandits. So the real looting is coming from the top. And then that misunderstanding, or that maybe willful misunderstanding that it's some group's fault, it's some minority's fault, why this is so, is infiltrated into people, and they're not looking at what's really going on. There's an inaccuracy of what resources are going on. And it would be in the benefit of the power brokers that we look at different groups of people as, who benefits, right? It benefits them for us to look at each other and think that that person over, I am worried about my situation because of that person over there. That is not even accurate. But that's what people are buying into. They're buying into the idea that somehow or another, if somebody else has some success, or somebody else is not harassed, or somebody else, gets ahead or gets an education, or any of those things, is somehow detrimental to me personally. It seems like one of the core belief system ideas that is going on is that we're, all of us in the middle class on down, are the ones that are, we're looking to each other and everything. I know, I hope I'm making sense, because sometimes I feel like I see a situation is obviously awful, but I kind of have an inclination to go into the history of it and what's going on behind the scenes. There's systemic racism, and they've been pitting white and black and people, and let us not forget the Native American communities and everything else against each other for centuries, and it never was true.
Right.
There's not even a scarcity. The scarcity that they're saying, if this person gets money over here, then this person over here is, supposed to, be disenfranchised so that that person gets ahead is not even a true thing. It never had to be true. It only had to be true if it benefits somebody. And I think it's important sometimes to sort of have that in the back of your mind. I mean, it's obviously the results of it are very awful, and we definitely need accountability, whatever process it takes to do accountability of law enforcement, of the military, whatever it takes to do accountability to the government. I was just in a sort of a quasi-debate with somebody about the lack of accountability in the benefits program. So if you do need some help, the process that you go through is traumatizing by itself to try to get help. And I try to keep that in mind when I know someone is dealing with the benefits program or has had to live with it for decades and decades, is that process is traumatizing itself. And there is racism behind it, absolutely. And that lack of accountability, where there's nothing in place to have it be just and equal and well-supplied and taking care of people, that's one definite aspect to it that is real and in everyone's face. And now we've got this thing where our country shut down, and they're not going to help you with anything. They're not going to help you with housing. They're not going to help you with food because of disenfranchisement and prejudice against poor people. And it's weird because there's a lot of middle-class people who are now knowing what the poor go through, the wall of indifference that happens just because you're poor, in any minority whatsoever. This is one huge factor behind it. Is someone benefits from this, but it's not us. It's not the regular people. Somebody else, and somebody else is their police force, and they're benefiting from it too. And that's wrong, very wrong.
You're actually right about that. You know, there was an article this week about a woman who is now running. She's from Florida, and she's unemployed. And the trauma of trying to go through the unemployment office down in Florida is what made her run for office. Now, not only is she running for office, she started these Facebook groups. And in the article, she describes herself as someone who always thought people who collected unemployment were just lazy, right? And she's like, I'm not lazy. Like, I can't get a job. I can't get any financial help. Like, there was all these things that totally quashed her biases about people who didn't have money or who were unemployed. And she was, like, ashamed of herself for thinking that way. Because there's a lot of her thoughts were, there's a lot of people just like me in my boat today. Now, what are we going to do? Because obviously the system and the government isn't going to help us. So she's like, I'm going to run for office. So there's a lot of people like her that have decided this, that after dealing with this system that disenfranchises them, and people, you know, the government isn't going to come to your aid because it's being controlled by Republicans, and Republicans have this belief that people in the middle and lower classes are lazy, right, and just want a free ride. So she also started this Facebook group, 2 Facebook groups, actually, of people like herself. And instead of them trying to find, one has 13,000 members now, and the other one has 8,000 members, and they're people that are getting together trying to help each other instead of being dependent on the system. Like she said, one person in her group paid her water bill, $90, no questions asked, just paid the bill, right? Another person sent this guy like a food kit from this, you know, meal subscription service so that he didn't have to worry about food for a week, right? So he could feed his family and focus on, you know, some of the bigger fish he had to fry to get through the week or the month or whatever it was. So maybe there'll be some commonality amongst people that will just come together and help each other. Even I read an article in a paper, and I was going to send some money to this woman if I could, you know, track her down and find her information. And not that I have all this money, but at least I wasn't in that position, right? And I was in a position that if I gave somebody something, Would I feel the pain? No, I wouldn't. So why not? You know, there was a host on Revolution Radio. It was one of the guys had lost his place to live, and his computer, which he'd had for a decade and had his whole life on it, the memory filled up and died. It crashed. And he was terrified he wasn't going to be able to save anything because he didn't save anything in the cloud. He didn't believe in tech. And, you know, he had said something in the host chat, and I thought, you know what? I reached out to him, and I said, look, is there some way I could help him? I said, I have, you know, a bunch of memory sticks. Can I send them to you? Would that help? And then I realized how much memory he actually had on the computer. So I bought him a hard drive, an external hard drive. It cost $40. And I sent it to him, and he was shocked that I did that. And I said, you know what? I said, it's a random act of kindness. I said, I'm in a position to help you. And I said, it's okay. I said, if this takes the stress of this off your light, off your back, so that you can focus on finding a place to live, because I know that's more important, then here, I'm glad to do it. And, you know, he was just so shocked that just someone who didn't even know him, who just caught that thread, just stepped in and took that one stressor out of his life for a moment so he could focus on the bigger things. And I always tell people that, you know, random acts of kindness, if there's something you can do, if you see a need, help. Don't wait to be asked. And I pass the stick.
So I think what we're dealing with, besides like Black Lives Matter and racism, is the caste class system. And there's a wonderful new book called Caste, The Origins of Our Discontent by Isabel Wilkerson. And I saw her on a couple of talk shows and that type of thing. In this brilliant book, Isabel Wilkerson gives us a masterful portrait of an unseen phenomenon in America as she explores through an immersive, deeply researched narrative and stories about real people how America today and throughout its history has been shaped by a hidden caste system, a rigid hierarchy of human rankings. Beyond race, class, or other factors, there is a powerful caste system that influences people's lives and behavior in the nation state. Linking the caste system from America, India, and Nazi Germany, Wilkerson explores 8 pillars that underlie caste systems across civilizations, including divine will, bloodline, stigma, and more. She uses riveting stories about people including Martin Luther King Jr., Satchel Paige, who was a single father and a childhood son, Wilkerson herself, and many others. So anyway, here. She documents how the Nazis studied the racial systems in America to plan their outcast of the Jews. She discusses why the cruel logic of caste requires that there be a bottom rung for those in the middle to measure themselves against. She writes about the surprising health cost of caste and depression and life expectancy and the effects of this hierarchy on our culture and politics. Finally, she points forward to ways Americans can move past, beyond the artificial destructive separations of human divisions toward hope in our common humanity. So I put that in my wish list of books I'm going to purchase, and I'm behind in my reading. But that's, you know, I'm very aware of the caste class system. I'm sure we all are. I married up in one of my marriages, and I was the trophy wife of a man who was a millionaire's son. And so I walked in that world for about 12 years, and you know, I was just shocked what it was like being involved in this other caste, and how they were in this club of, you know, they always got everything they wanted and needed. And I remember at one point looking back at it, we went to Atlantic City, and we were invited to stay at the Trump Hotel. We didn't meet Trump, but there was some kind of influence that my family I had married into had, that we got this special invitation to stay at the Trump Hotel. And we were driven around in a limousine And I didn't know what it was all about. I was just like sitting there in the back seat going, what in the world is going on? It was almost like being married to the mafia. So, but I myself, my daddy was a mailman. We were really poor. I remember as a child, I would get a bag of Oreos, and I had to make them last 2 weeks. So I got into protecting food. I would get like a Hershey bar, and all the neighborhood children would come up and give me, and I was like, no, it's mine. So I would hide. I learned to hide food because when we were fed for dinner, it was like, we got one little super thin pork chop or a little, cup of chicken or something, and everything was rationed out to us. And we could never go up and take what we wanted to eat off the stove. My mother rationed it, and when you ate it all, that was it. When I was a child, my stomach was so shrunken because I never was full. I was always hungry, and when I met my husband, he goes, well, that's part of why you're so short. You were deprived of food and clean air. The air was horrible, and the water was pretty toxic and everything. So it's not all black or brown, but there is, in addition, a caste class system. And so I'll pass the talking stick to the next person.
Yeah. Well, I think it's an economic caste system, which Karen keeps speaking to, correct?
Right.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, part of the caste system impinging on my life had to do with the fact that my father's family was more Native American than they would have wanted to admit in the South. And so they would kind of hide the origin. I think my grandmother was full and my grandpa was part, and that of all the racism that went on against Native Americans, galls me to no end when the president keeps calling Elizabeth Warren Pocahontas, because it's kind of like, yes, doesn't look classically Native American, but see, in the family history, the having Native roots was, for many, many centuries, was something that if you were not on the reservation in a tribal sense, you were trying to make sure people didn't know about in certain parts of the country, And so most of the caste stuff is racially based, absolutely. But the competition is so fierce that there's other factors that also, the perception of competition, I should say, is so fierce that other factors are involved as well. But part of my guilty pleasure here during the COVID is I'm watching all those PBS, BBC, Regency drama about the 18th century and the caste system that they had in England in the Victorian and Edwardian era. It's very enlightening because the least little scandal and you were down in it. You were down in the gutter in two shakes. I mean, that's the fragility and lack of resilience of unfettered capitalism, which doesn't have any, it's cronyism. It's crony capitalism. And I argue all the time with people, when I'm talking about the basic income, they say, oh, you're a communist or a socialist. And I go, no, it's kind of a weird, not any of those things. One thing it is it's actually demand-side capitalism, meaning that we actually haven't had unfettered, laissez-faire, free market capitalism for a long time, but definitely since the Reagan era, because when we did supply-side economics, that was supporting and protecting the corporate interests and not supporting and protecting everybody else. And what a basic income does is it puts the financial resources back into balance with all of it so that people have basic dignity. And that is something MLK was talking about in his book, with dignity. Like when he thought in terms of some kind of basic income,
he did not think of it as you're barely going to get by and you're going to run out of money at the end of the month, and you're going to never go out of your house or anything like that. He meant that there'd be a dignity-based support system. And Reagan's own economist, Milton Friedman, believed in the basic income in the form of a negative income tax. So if you drop below the poverty line, you would get a bigger tax return that would help you get you back up above above the poverty line. The poverty line is, why is there anyone below it at all? That if you have an industrial country as wealthy as ours, there should be a floor to poverty, because you need that foundation to support everything else. And since my topic area for my new podcast starts on September 4th, carewithpodcast.com, there's my plug there. There's a whole class of people who are completely ignored, invisible, and not even counted in the GDP, and that's caregivers. People who unpaid family caregivers who make nothing, work 24/7. They're on call 24/7, and people say Steve Forbes, Forbes magazine, he came out against the basic income, and he said it'll make people lazy. And I go, okay, so I know some people, a large group of people, that the day we have a basic income, they're going to get up in the morning and do exactly what they did the day before. They're not going to quit their job. They're not going to sit around on the couch and get colon cancer and watch blue TV. They're going to get up and work and take care of their family. I mean, let's think better of our, everybody, because all kinds of families that are poor and middle class, they take care of their families and they get it done, and they're being deprived of being able to do that right now. We need a new social contract. Our social contract is flushed. Okay? Whatever we thought of before, we're in a whole different era. And we have the tools to go forward and prosper together. But we're being blocked from being able to access them for some people's greed. And it makes only sense to them, I think. The only thing that this entire scenario makes sense to them, no one else, So I think it's time that we put resources into everybody's hands and let them be unleashed to do what they can do, that they're not allowed to be. How many scientists that could have, future scientists, future researchers could we have had who were born into poverty and they never got an education and they never got any support? How many people do we have to solve all kinds of diseases, to invent all kinds of technologies? Have we made it completely impossible for them to unleash what they are inside and do it because of poverty? Poverty is unnecessary. And it's becoming less more unnecessary as we get into technological solutions. We have amazing technological solutions that we can't even adopt because the economics are not there, and we're worried about people losing their jobs. And maybe they should. Some of those jobs are very dangerous. Some of those jobs will make you all toxic in your body, and some of those jobs will hurt your back. A lot of them will. We literally have it in our hands. We have the technology. We have the knowledge. We don't have the political will, and we're sidetracked by the constant. What did this guy say today in the tweet? Like, forget about that. Yeah, I don't care. I think that's the point where that is the point of what he's doing is distraction. And it's time that we concentrate on what can we do in making that come forward. So there you go. There's my soapbox, and I'll pass the stick.
Thank you. So, Debra, you brought this article, sent it to me. It says scientists have found coronavirus in a long-vacant apartment. A possible spreader with the fecal aerosol plumes. And scientists continue to investigate the role of toilets in the spread of coronavirus. Would you like to bring us a report on that article? Very fast.
So what that was an apartment block or building in Hong Kong, and they had a family of like 6 people, and they all got coronavirus, right? And the apartment directly above them had been empty for months. And they, you know, in Hong Kong, they're actually doing tests, trying to figure out how this thing is spreading. So the scientists actually went into the apartment, since it was vacant, above this family that had all gotten sick, and they wanted to see if the virus was there. And it turned out they found it in the toilet, in the aerosols coming from the toilet when it was flushed. So how did that happen, right? This apartment had been vacant for months before. It had been vacant before the virus started. So how did this virus get there? Even if it hadn't been, it had been vacant for months, the virus technically should have died, right? Because nobody was there. It has a shelf life, and it didn't. And then what they did is they tested every apartment on every level as far as they could go, and they found that this virus spread 12 floors above the apartment of the family that had all been affected. Now, anything else above the 12th floor they didn't find any traces of the virus, but they found it in every apartment on every floor, the 12 floors above it. So it's spreading via the plumbing system, right? And when you flush a toilet, you should always put it down because it creates aerosols in the air. And I don't think a lot of people know that. Before the virus, I didn't even realize that, right? And now I've gotten meticulous about always making sure the toilet lid is shut before I flush it. So that's what that article was above, and it shocked the scientists, right? They were even surprised. And then there was also another article this week where they have found that the virus lives on frozen food packages for 3 weeks.
Oh, did you send that to me? Did you send that?
I did send that.
Yeah,
I did send that to you because New Zealand believes that's where their outbreak came from, but they're not sure because they've had outbreaks that have occurred where people have worked or handled frozen food packages from China.
Oh.
And New
but
Zealand
now
believes
it's so worldwide. Why are they always targeting China? So yeah, things are coming in from China. Okay.
But there's a lot of food that comes from China, especially seafood. If you go into our grocery store and you look at the origins of a lot of that food, you'll be shocked at how much of it's coming from China. And I don't buy food that comes from China because I've traveled to China.
Here's what. Trace amounts of COVID-19 found by Chinese cities on packages of frozen foods. And I saw something about Brazil. No, let's see. This is an old article. Is it? No. Sorry, I'm looking to find out while you're talking about it. So I know you said that, but I missed it.
That's okay. That's okay.
Anyway.
So now there's a concern that the virus is spreading. It's creating hot spots because it's spreading within the food supply chain. But again,
so
they're not
says,
sure, right?
It came from Brazil, the chicken wings from Brazil, shrimp from Ecuador.
Yes. And they found trace amounts of the virus on all of it.
Frozen meat and fish for up to 3 weeks. But that paper has not gone through a peer review yet. So good news, it's only been found on the packages themselves and not the food itself. So I get my frozen food and I stick it in my freezer. So it could be in my freezer. Shoot, now I got to empty out my whole freezer. And what do? You wash it, you spray it. Oh,
I can tell you what you do because I do this. I do this.
Yeah.
Brett was a medic in the Army.
Tell us, Mama, what do you do?
Well, Brett was a medic in the Army, and I worked as a caregiver when both of us had to take, information in about epidemiology and universal precautions. And one of the early videos I saw is about when you come back from the store, make sure that you go through a process of decontaminating the containers of the food. So I set up an ironing board outside and on the front patio, and anything that comes into the house has to be disinfected. And I put it dirty on one side of the ironing board, wash it off with not non-toxic type of whatever you got, vinegar or, whatever it is, can disinfect it. The cans, the boxes, the frozen food, I disinfect everything. And then I put it on the other side, and then Brett takes it and puts it away. But nothing comes into our house. If it's fresh food, like lettuce or cabbage or tomatoes or something like that, we have a bowl that we fill with water and vinegar, and we soak it and then rinse it off, and then we put it away into the refrigerator. But we literally have come up with a procedure because I have virus-sensitive asthma. I've almost expired a couple times because of viruses. I can't afford to fool around, and I take this seriously. And so I entertain the neighbors by doing this, but so far so good. They're watching me do it.
There she is.
But I mean, this is there's known things about epidemiology. I mean, obviously, coronavirus has a lot of aspects they're still studying. One of the things I was reading about today is reinfection. People who had it are not necessarily retaining immunity. And so there's some reinfection. So we're still learning what this thing is. But there is basic universal precautions when you are dealing with something that might be contaminated, and I'm doing it faithfully every time. And I can't say, hey, everyone, you should do that, but that's what this household's doing. And if I look like a crazy, clean freak like Howard Hughes, I will.
Oh, God. All right. We're all going to die. But it just seems like it's coming and going. It'll get you in the toilet system. So what do you do when you're out and you got to go to the bathroom? You got to make sure you go before you go out because you're in a public toilet system.
Yeah, I had 3 kids. You go before you leave. You go before you leave,
And you hope you don't have to go while you're there.
Consolidate your errands. We finally had it hooked up in New Mexico where we'd get some food stamps. I'm not ashamed to say that. And we can now purchase things, order them in from Amazon at least. And so when the boxes come, and they throw them. You can tell they throw them because we had all kinds of squash cans and boxes this time. But I can understand why it's an uptight job just because everyone's doing this right now. But again, set up the ironing board, clean everything off before it comes into the house. But that kind of reduces how much that we have to go out shopping. Or if it's a bigger shopping thing in a store, I send Brett because need a man cane. He walks a lot faster than me, and he's a hunter shopper. He's in, he's out. I don't have to worry about it. But long term, I hope we start to get some procedures and things about how to deal with this as an overall entity. We're all one entity on this planet. The people that try to set themselves apart as a caste or think that they're better than everyone else, or think of those of us who are doing what I'm doing is crazy. We're all one thing, and it's one entity, including the viruses. The viruses are part of our planet too. They come up and down and back and reassert themselves. And reading the 1920 pandemic, the Spanish flu pandemic, is kind of an interesting thing to find out about because of how similar some of the things are. And they were just barely into universal precautions, generally speaking, wearing masks. At the beginning of it, not everyone was doing it. By the end of it, everyone was wearing a mask because they knew someone who had died. So we're in the middle of this thing. Humanity has always had its wits. Part of why we even have a toilet system was because of cholera, So we're going to be learning on this learning curve and using our wits and working together. And the people who are refusing to go by the rules, they're the most at risk, and they need to know that. And I know, sometimes when I'm talking to you guys, I feel like I'm hearing a lot of objecting to what we're saying, because we know I've literally had to discontinue interacting with people that I've known for a long time because it's okay if they have a different opinion, but they're so hard to deal with in trying to just have a discussion. And I'm at the point now where my own peace of mind requires me to just go with my plan. And I'm not scared. I know people want to say, oh, you're doing that because you're scared. I'm not scared. I'm cautious. There's a big difference. And I try to do it with knowledge. It's important that you go with knowledge. And I'm very concerned about a segment of the population that's just very devil-may-care. And I try to think of what is that, from my heart. And I think it is a sort of a general thing that's happening as a result of all the trauma we've been involved in, not just this year, but prior. There's kind of the eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow you're going to die kind of thing. And I really think that there's a back note of despair and giving up in it. And that's why, it is also important to look for what works and look for what could be better. How could we make these things better? How could we support efforts of justice? How can we support economic justice? How can we support things? It's trying to not be so, against and then more for.
Right.
And it's hard. It's difficult right now. Passing the stick.
Wow. Okay. So I pulled up the article, what does it mean if that someone has caught COVID-19 for a second time? Did that come from you, or did I find that one? That was on my list here.
I think you found it, yeah.
Okay, so
I sent
Debra,
that to
did you
too.
send that to me?
Yeah,
okay, do you want to give
you.
us a report on that article?
So they found a man
Yeah,
in China, I believe, who got COVID twice. He was symptomatic twice. And so the scientists are using this case because the WHO just came out, I want to say today or yesterday, after the information was being passed around in the scientific community about this, that it's possible to get it twice, but it's rare. It's not common. And I don't know how much I believe that because I don't believe they know enough. They've only been testing antibodies since they've been working on the vaccine. They know that antibodies only last 3 months in the body, the natural antibodies created by having this. Now, I do have a friend who actually got this twice, and the government actually came in because he's an ex-vet, so he gets all of his care through the VA, and the government actually came to his house, took his blood, made him sign an NDA, and they mentioned something about they'll use this to complete their investigation, and then they left. So he doesn't know what investigation, what it means, and these weren't your typical people from the VA. So I believe there was something very fishy and suspicious behind this, but because he is a vet, he has a tendency to do whatever the government tells him. He's also a Republican and a Trump supporter, by the way. And so his whole family got COVID. They got very sick. Now, he's the only one that got it twice. Now, he didn't get as sick the second time, but he did get sick. So, it makes me question the validity of any vaccine because the vaccine is counting on antibodies, a longevity of the antibodies, right? And if the antibodies only stay alive 3 months, what good is the vaccine? And what good is intentionally exposing yourself to the virus, right, if the antibodies only last 3 months and you can catch this again? So they don't know enough about this, right? They've only found the first case or two of this. And so this needs to be looked at more. I think there needs to be a deeper dive into this. But then, like the CDC just said, passed new guidance, incompetent guidance, I can't believe they did this, that says that if you've been exposed but you're asymptomatic, you don't need to be tested.
which is a load of crap because common sense and contact tracing requires anybody exposed to be tested, right?
They
They're
said they had
data
pressure from the top. They had pressure from above. So this is what I mean by the president is a dictator. So he's dictating what the CDC, and the CDC should be independent of any political party.
Absolutely. The
Everything
FDA
is politicized.
and the CDC.
So this guy wants us dead. Trump wants you dead. Get that, everybody.
No, it's not that he wants you dead. He wants the numbers to come down for the sake of his reelection, and this was a way to do it.
Yeah, but the end result, your intentions are made manifest by your results. So if this policy gets enacted, then people will get sick, and you or someone you know, or eventually you, because it keeps going around and going around, and it weakens your organs. You may recover, but now your life expectancy is down 10 years. So it's like someone is, in a car accident, and they might be in a coma for a year, but they eventually die because of the car accident. That's what COVID is. You get it, and you may recover or appear to recover, but eventually. So all these deaths are not being counted, but what they're measuring is last year to this year. They get the real number of how many people are dying is comparing to the average numbers of what it was last year before COVID. And then once COVID passes, we'll have new numbers about how many people die in a given population, like a city or a town or a state or a country, in a year. And we'll have better statistics about how deleterious COVID is. And that's saying if COVID ever does go away or dissipate. So, okay, so back to, sorry, I'm following some of the threads while we're talking. So this guy, they think got reinfected. He's so, and then some people they thought was a reinfection. Most of them were.
Now
it was still ongoing.
It had been more
than
3 months since he recovered from the first infection, so that's what got their attention.
Right.
So
anyway, what about the intensity of the virus? Okay, finish up on that, and then I have a question.
What about the intensity of the virus?
I have an article I put up here. Is coronavirus weakening?
Oh, I didn't see that article.
Okay, so finish your thread, and then I will.
No, that was it. That was all. That was all I had to speak on that topic.
Okay, so some of the CDC guidelines have been overturned, or at least the recommendations, right? They call it recommendations. And one of the things we're doing here in Maui is... Go ahead.
No.
You there?
Sorry. Can you hear me? My phone might die. Sorry.
Okay. So one of the things they're doing here in Maui or in Oahu is they're probably going to lock down for 2 weeks because they lost control of the virus. And I have to look that up again. I didn't get the article, but they were going to lock down, I think, Friday at midnight, get out if you want. And they're going to lock down for 2 weeks so they can reset. And they're doing the contact tracing. But they let the tourists in, and they were able to come if they quarantine for 14 days. Well, some of the tourists have this, I call it a Trumpism attitude that, I'm invulnerable and it's not going to affect me, so I don't care who I go out and infect and possibly kill. I don't know what that is. A bunch of sociopathic, actually it's psychopathic. When your intention ends up with somebody dying, you're psychopathic. Psychopathic behaviors that are being emulated and copied because of a psychopathic president. So they come in and they infect people. They agree to a quarantine. They sign papers. They do the procedure. They get it here, and they go around to the popular tourist locations. And the population at the time was kind of relaxing because, we had less than, 2 digits. We had less than 10 people getting infected. So we were like on the home stretch. And now they're going around and these people tested positive, and they got arrested. Some of them get fined. Some of them get fined and sent back. They had all these arraignments with all these people that just openly violated their quarantine. So now they're going to lock down again. But here's what it says. The title is Coronavirus Weakening? And so there have been concerns that the virus could have mutated over the months, potentially becoming even more infectious and deadly, although others have suggested that a mutation could lead to COVID actually becoming weaker. So we don't know if it's getting stronger or weakening. So let's just go down if it's weakening. The suggestion first reared its head back in June when a doctor in Italy, which was one of the hardest hit countries in Europe, expressed the opinion that the virus could die out by itself, so it would not need a vaccine. So this Italian guy said it was like an aggressive tiger in March, but in April it's now like a wild cat. It's down to a pussycat level. So he claimed that people that aged 80 or 90 are now sitting up in bed and they're breathing without help, where the same patients at the beginning of the virus would have died in 2 or 3 days. Okay, what else? So while weakening the virus through mutations is theoretically possible, it's not something we should expect, and any claims of nature would need to be verified in a more systematic way. But I read that article, and I went for a moment there, wouldn't that be great if it just got less and less? But based on what happened with this Spanish flu, which was 100 years ago, it looks like this is going to be around for a couple of years. I don't think I'm going to travel. And you know what's going to happen here? It might be across the globe. You won't be able to get on a plane without a vaccine. So, what would you do? Would you take the vaccine or not? Would
no,
you take the
absolutely
vaccine
not.
if that was the only way you could travel through states?
Nope. I don't trust them.
Karen?
No one knows what the long-term
you?
effects of that vaccine are, and they haven't tested it. I'm in a pickle because I get the kind of viruses that have almost took me out were from vaccines. The virus sensitivity problem I have is that, you're getting the virus in the vaccine, and I'm one of those people. I'm kind of in a different category. I don't know. I think it's going to be on an individual basis, but I think it would depend on how tested it is. If it's the first one out of the gate, I'm probably not. So, watching it and playing it by ear, but I wanted to go back to, is it dying out or not? Well, that's what pandemics do versus an epidemic. There's kind of like a way ramped up dynamic that looks like, and I'm not a, health professional that way, so I don't know for sure, but the Spanish flu had 3 waves, and the second wave killed more people than the first wave because, even though humans are going to throw all of our intelligence at this thing, we also have a lot of stupidity in the face of it. And if you think of a virus, it's kind of like not a little tiny piece of something that's, just one little tiny thing. And you think of a virus as an entire entity, that is intelligent in its aggregate. It has an intelligence to it. It knows this about its host. We're its host, and it knows that about us, is that we are vulnerable. We're vulnerable because we are not thinking with a single-minded intensity, because our survival is not just, health-based survival. It's also food. It's also, we have a lot of things to keep our minds occupied that we deem important, and we're like, okay, well, that was fun. Let's do something else now. We get bored. We get complacent. We get defiant. We're not as united in one purpose as an intelligence of a aggregate. A.R. Borden called it the bio-kind bio-mind, and that's a very real thing. And viruses,
we literally get the term "go viral," in technology, from the phenomenon of what these kinds of things are. And there's a lot of factors to it. The virus also meets us when we're weakened, not just that we exist, but where we're weakened in terms of our general health of everybody. If we have a lot of people who air pollution figures into this, it started in China. They keep talking about people eating bats, but let me tell you, they have bad air pollution there. And it was kind of weird because when we did shut the whole world down, the air pollution cleared up very quickly. And some places they could see mountains they'd never seen before. And wildlife started to come down the hills and into the towns. Where our impact on the environment is not just affecting the environment, it's affecting us too. So in this sort of aggregate, how are we going to fight this thing? We're only probably as good at resisting a virus as we are aggregately, all of us together, healthy. And that's something that we're talking about vaccines and things are sort of an individualized approach of doing it, but we also have to look at the lack of resilience that humans are developing because we eat bad food, we breathe bad air, we have too many people in poverty, we have lots of people that don't have access to just basic health care, and we have lots and lots of chemicals in the environment. And I think that part of the fight is definitely everything we can throw at it, but part of the fight has got to be to live with planet Earth in a more balanced way and with each other too. That's really a big part of it. And respecting each other. When you wear a mask, you're not protecting yourself, you're protecting someone else. And so it's important that we adapt in wisdom. It doesn't feel good right now that, people aren't. But that it's going to be the way we defeat it, I think. Well, I'll say one more thing and then I'll pass the stick. How's that? Water. We are 70% water. We need to make sure our water is clean. We need to make sure there's no toxins in it. I've just gotten a discussion with people about microplastics in the ocean. It's now in all of our food, all of our seafood, inside of us. We cannot get away from, we're finding out the hard way we can't get away from caring for the environment and planet Earth to take care of ourselves. And with that, I'll pass the stick.
Absolutely. We're living on a biosphere that we're dependent on, and we've become parasites to it, and we're not taking care of it. So do we expect it to keep letting us thrive and survive? No. It's going to try and knock us off of it. I think our lack of respect for the environment and for each other is what led us into the situation we're in with COVID right now. Passing the stick.
You there, Janet? Did we lose Janet?
Hold on, I was muted by accident, sorry. I worked for the Northeast Watershed Research Division at Penn State University, and we had these piezometers, in another word, and we stick into the soil, and then we would analyze the groundwater, from the whole area, from all the farmers, what they're contributing, the people, the medicines that end up in our water. So if we have a planet that's got COVID everywhere, COVID's got to be in our water. So I don't know if anybody's studying that impact of what do we do when these viruses get into our systems. Does that create some kind of immunity to it? Does that accelerate the death rate? Because, thinking of the toilet flushing, that means it's in our water. Toilets flush with water. The waters go to our plants, our sanitation plants. They found that we cannot get all the, prescription drugs out of the water. And so we keep changing everybody, all these drugs that go into the water, and now we've got viruses. So I don't know how this is. I don't think there's anything we do as a species with how things are that we won't mutate into another species. We probably could not survive if we were to take this body we are now and take it back to, the 50s, right? and we try to walk around in this body. I think that we wouldn't be able to handle the climate back then. It would be too pure or something. We'd start choking to death. Because things would be so much cleaner, and we're adapted. Those of us who survive and we live another year, each time we go to our birthday, we've lived another year, and we've been subjected to all of these environmental influences for yet another year, and somehow we've survived. So congratulations every time you reach the anniversary of your orbit around this planet that you have survived all that's been thrown at us. Okay, so we have, let's say 10 minutes top. And what is our burning subject we want to talk about? I'm going to go to Debra because she was short in her response. What do you
I
want
may
to talk
not make
about,
it the
Debra?
10 minutes. I may not make it the 10 minutes. My device is about to die.
Okay, so go ahead and talk. Your device might die.
No, those were, for the most part, the topics, right? The politicization of the CDC, where we are with COVID today, the things that are going on in our country, our caste system.
What do you think of the convention?
What? You mean the reality show that they're calling a convention?
Yeah, tell us about it.
It's not a convention. It's a meeting of false praise and lies of Trump for an audience of one being Trump. This wasn't a convention. Why it was held, They politicized the White House by him accepting the nomination at the White House, by having a political rally outside the White House. I mean, everything that this man is doing and all of his enablers is despicable. But, again, to everyone that supports him, the ends justifies the means. As long as the conservative movement is represented and they get to stay in power, they don't care about the damage that's being done. And I'm passing the stick.
Okay. Karen, let's make this the final round. What would you like to say?
Well, as I talked to you before, I'm taking a break from this, and I've appreciated interacting with you guys. And I'm taking a break because I'm launching a podcast on September 4th. It's called the What is Care Worth to Society? It's about caregivers and the basic income. careworthpodcast.com. I'm getting some help from other podcasters in the basic income movement to get this thing launched and getting some good support. And, I'm drilling down on this one topic because, everything that they say against the basic income, they're ignoring a very large group of people who take care of their family members, who take care of their elders, take care of disabled people, take care of animals, and take care of the planet. We are ignoring the caring part of our society, and we need to support that. And really, that's our connection to our Mother Gaia planet, because she's taking care of us. And we need to respect that and stop ignoring how important that is. So that's kind of the tenor of what I'll be talking about. I'll be kind of telling people stuff they may not know about what it's like to be a caregiver. Not everyone has the experience I did of doing that for 20 years. And not a lot of people also have dealt with the system. and I'm going to go into detail about what it's like to have the system. And I'd kind of like to see the system go away. So that's what I'm doing. And I've appreciated coming on. I'll come back. Once I kind of get this thing on a podcast like that is kind of like a machine. I'm pre-recording it, so it's got to have all these bells and whistles and background stuff, and that's fun for me. But the end result is something that I hope helps people, and that's what I'll be doing. Thank you.
Excellent. We enjoy your time away from us, and we'll be welcoming you back when you get here. Let me use this time to say tomorrow we have a show called UFO Secret Space with Lisa O'Hara, who is an experiencer contactee. And then next week on what is this show? Elephants in Our Rooms, we have Steve Theremin, who is known as Swami Beyond Ananda. I gave him all these options. He said, I want to come on the political show. So look up Swami Beyond Ananda on your YouTube search and check him out. So he's going to join us. He's kind of famous on our show on Thursday. And then we have Kenneth Hopkins on Sunday on Sacred Matrix, and Paul, I don't know how to pronounce it. It's French. I'll have to ask him. It's Vecchiet. Becce and Leslie Wilkinson. They're going to talk about. What are they going to talk about? Let's see. The Disclosure Paradox is a novel, and experiences. So they're experienced in the UFO field and disclosure. Okay. So I think that's it for today. I got to find my board so I can end this show. And thank you for coming on today. And much loving and blessings and aloha. And we'll see you tomorrow.